Hey there, beautiful people. In this video, I am going to show you how to use Supabase OAuth with Sveltekit. And I'm not going to be doing much coding. You can find a link to the Git repo down in the description. And of course, if you see something that maybe I can improve or do something differently, then feel free to leave a comment. Thanks a lot. Let's rock. All right, to get us started, I'm going to go ahead and click the GitHub login button over here just to show you what we're doing. This is a very simple demo. When we log in, we're going to go out and get the avatar of the person who's logged in, show it up here next to the logout button, and a quick little simple list of whatnot. So log in and of course log out takes us back here. All right, we're going to take a look at the layout file over here on the left. Not too much going on that I'm showing right now. Mainly, hey, there's the home link. If there's a session that exists, and this is the Sveltekit session store, we're going to show the image, show the logout button. Otherwise, we're going to show the login button. All right, and as you can see here, when we click the login button, we call this sign-in function and pass it the GitHub string. So if you have GitLab, then you can pass in GitLab. Twitter, you can pass in Twitter. I have not tested any of those. I've only messed with GitHub at this point. But if you look up here at the top, we're going to import the Supabase client and then the sign out and sign in functions from Supabase. So let's go check out that file. At the top, if you've messed with Supabase before, it's probably going to look pretty familiar. We're basically creating the client with the URL and our anon key that we're bringing in from our environment file and creating this Supabase client. And for sign-in, it's nice and easy with OAuth. You just pass in provider as a string. So I thought, hey, why not just have a single sign-in function and you just pass that in yourself wherever you're logging in from. And sign out's pretty simple as well. All right, so how's this working? So I don't know if you know about this on-auth state change that Supabase provides, but we're going to use that to detect when somebody's signed in and when somebody has signed out. And when there's any kind of event, the event gets passed in and a session. Of course, we've got this funky naming convention here because we have the Sveltekit session store that we're importing on this file, so we don't want those to clash. The events that I've seen are signed in, signed out, and token refreshed. But we're just going to mess with the sign in and sign out. So once you get signed in, we're going to detect that event and we want to set a cookie. And so as a side note, if you're not using HTTP only cookies, you can actually set the cookie with document.cookie. And you can take a look at that if that applies to you. However, we are going to be using HTTP only cookies in this case. So to handle that, we're going to fetch an endpoint from Sveltekit with post, and we're going to pass in the Supabase session for the body. So let's take a look at that in API cookie. All right, we're going to check for a request body up here. If so, we're going to grab that. And then if there is a session, we're going to return with a header of set cookie. In this case, the name of our cookie is session. And we're just going to pass in, again, the session information. We're going to use expires at to help us get the expires time. I can't imagine why there wouldn't be an expires at in the session, but just in case, I do this ternary operator. And if for some reason it happens to not be there, we're just going to set this to a date in the past so the cookie will just expire automatically. All right, so we've logged in, we've detected that we've logged in, and we've set a cookie. So now after we set that cookie, if the response from that is a 200, we're going to do a few things. We're going to load pages, call that function to hydrate some information, and we're going to hydrate the session store with the Supabase session.user object. Pardon me. It's my understanding that you should never store an access token in the Sveltekit session store. So that's why we're only grabbing this part of the returned session, which does not include access tokens. If you wanted to log that out into the console and double check. And then we're going to do a little redirect. And let's go from the top and see what we have going on here. All right. To demonstrate what load pages does, I'm actually going to comment it out, and we'll see what happens when we log in. All right, we get our avatar, but there's no list of things anymore. And so the avatar is coming from this right here. We're hydrating the Sveltekit session, but we're not loading any pages. And the big reason for this is we logged in from slash, basically from root. And then after we logged in, we're staying on slash. And so we're not really going anywhere, so to speak. And so there are no server-side requests in order for us to grab our information. So we have to find a way to hydrate that information. And I'm doing that through the load pages function, which I'm bringing in as part of the store, the pages store itself. Nothing special in that. We can take a look at it, but we're really just making a request to Supabase. This is client side. We don't need to do anything special here. Supabase grabs the auth token from local storage in the browser and does its thing. So we use this to hydrate our information only after somebody's logged in. It never really runs again at this point. We hydrate the session, Sveltekit session store, with this information, and part of that is grabbing information for the avatar to display that. And then there's this little quirk on logging in with OAuth, and it's in the spec I've seen in places. Oh, I'm clicking the wrong stuff here. Let's get this right. There we go. All right. So if we pull that out of there, we'll go ahead and log out, log back in, and you'll see this hash access token. Then it just goes back to a hash. Well, that's all fine and dandy. Everything looks good. We can click through to this page, go to page/millennium. But if we happen to hit the back button in our browser, it goes back to that hash, but we don't see anything change. I don't know why that is, why Sveltekit doesn't really render anything. And maybe it's not Sveltekit's issue. Maybe it's, I don't know what's going on there, but it doesn't work right. Maybe you can figure that out, or maybe you know why, but I don't. So how I get around that is doing a little go-to to make sure that hash is gone. And then additionally, I do this replace state equals true, just so the slash hash is not in the page history anymore. So if we log out, log back in, that hash is there for a second, but then we go back to slash, and then millennium, and then we can go back and everything changes. I don't know, maybe I'm doing something wrong there. Help me out in the comments. So those are the three things we do after we log in. When we refresh the page, this gets populated again because of the cookie. So let's check out hooks. We've got two functions. We got the handle function, where we grab all the cookies that we have in the browser, and then if there's one called session, we're going to grab that information. And as I said before, we should not be storing access tokens in the Sveltekit session store. So I want to be able to get this access token passed to the server side somehow. And the way I do that is through event.locals. And I'm assigning this object, if session exists, if there is one, I'm assigning this object to event.locals.user. And this user is just made up. You can, if you want to have session there, you can. This is what I'm doing. And so that'll be passed along in the request to the server side, and on the server side, we'll be able to access this access token, or in this case, ID. We're not going to use that, but all right. And one more thing we're going to do is set event.locals.session. And so if the session exists, we're going to grab that same session.user information. So the stuff that doesn't have access tokens, and we're going to assign it to session. All right, and then once handler gets called, at some point get session is going to get called, and all we're going to do is return event.locals.session. All that non-access token information that we want, it'll either have the information we need or it'll just be null. So one of the reasons why I do event.locals.session up here is because I just don't want to do things twice. So we don't have to have it up here. The alternative is to get the information from get session down here. But what we would have to do is grab the cookies, see if there's a cookie called session, and then return all that data. But we've already gotten all the cookies up here in handle, so why not just go ahead and assign it to something right here, and then we'll just reference event.locals.session down here. We'll just simply return whatever's there. So you can do whatever you want, but that's how I decided to do it. All right, so we've got event.locals.user populated with the access token, and in this case ID. And so when we refresh on slash, that's the index file. So that is right here. And I don't know if you're aware or not, but they have a thing called shadow endpoints now in Sveltekit. So with our index.svelte file, we can create a shadow endpoint by just replicating the name and then putting .js. So let's look at this. Let's see what happens when we have a server-side request for the index file or the slash. So here we're grabbing event.locals.user. All right, assigning that to the user. And then we're going to take our Supabase client that we bring in and set the access token with this. All right, now the caveat here is that I'm assuming Supabase, or whatever we're trying to access in this particular case, Supabase has row level security enabled, so it's not just wide open public access. And so you just want to grab this particular logged in user's information. Well, normally on the client side, that's a piece of cake. The Supabase client does everything automatically, accesses local storage in the browser, grabs the token from there, and we're all good. But in the server side, we have to have a different way of doing that because Supabase on the server side does not have access to your browser, right? And so that's why I grab some of the session information, the access token, and assign it to event.locals.user. So that way on the server side, we can grab that information and tell Supabase, hey, use this access token with this request for information. And so we do that. We assign the data that comes back to server pages in this case. And if you're familiar with shadow endpoints, we just return with a status, and the body can include whatever information we want, and then this becomes a prop for the Svelte file, if that makes sense. So instead of doing script context equals module and all the load stuff, you can just use a shadow endpoint instead. And so here we are exporting our prop, and we're going to assign it to a pages store just to have some reactivity going on, and then we display our pages. Now, one quick note is you don't technically have to do this event.locals.user and storing the access token in that and setting auth. One thing you can do is use the, the server or the service token that you have. That's the That's the token or API key or whatever you want to call it that bypasses all of your row level security in Supabase. So you could do that, right? And maybe what that might look like is you put that key in your environment file and you bring that in right here. And then you can just create another Supabase client. You know, maybe it's called Supadmin or whatever, right? And you just create that client with the same URL, but the service key instead of the anon key. And so once you have that client set up, here, you would just bring in Supadmin instead of Supabase client and use that. And it's going to use your service token, ID, key, whatever it is. And you don't have to worry about doing all this. However, to me, that's kind of dangerous. Maybe I misunderstand how you use the service key. But to me, if you have to stick that in your environment file and your server gets hacked or wherever this is running at, if it gets hacked and somebody gets access to your environment file, they just got that service token or ID and basically have full access to your database, and they're probably going to pilfer it before you even know what happened. And so I'd rather not risk that. So I don't like that route. I'd rather just do this here. But it is an option. All right, so this basically is how when we refresh, we've got access, or we're able to display all of our, in this case, pages when we do a refresh. So we're grabbing event.locals.user, the access token, letting Supabase know we can use that for its query, return the data, and we're all good. I'm not going to go through app or page. App is just a mirror of index. As a matter of fact, I will show you this, why I did that. On the go-to, if you do something other than wherever you're trying to log in from, so in our case it's /, you don't need to load pages and you don't need to hydrate your session either. You don't need to hydrate either one of these. If you're going to go here, then there's going to be a server request for this page, and so our cookie is going to take care of that. So just to demonstrate, let's log out. I don't know why that didn't go away down there. All right. Log in. I can go to app, and everything's there. Oh, actually our session is not. So apparently we still have to hydrate the session. So anyway, maybe you do need still need the session there, but you only have to hydrate this if, like I said, if you go back to the same page you were logging in from. All right. Okay. Refresh, everything looks good. All right, so then there's the log out, right? We log out, everything goes back to the way it was at the beginning. So once we detect the sign out from our Supabase on auth state, if we just detect a sign out, we're basically just going to clear some information, so all that stuff should go away. And then we need to expire our cookie. And again, there's a non-HTTP only cookie version of how to do that, but we're going to call this API endpoint. And again, pretty simple on the delete, 204, blank out the session data, and set an expiry time in the past. Pretty simple. And then once we get a response back, as long as it is a 204, we're going to redirect back to the home page basically. So if I were to go here and log out from here, I go back to /. All right, and so we're just simply calling sign out here when we click that button, and all's well. Is there anything else? I think that's it. So if you have any comments, any improvements I should be making, let me know. And thanks for watching. Bye.